Good morning, everyone. My name is Johanna Daniel. If this is your first time joining me live, I am the founder of Wounds to Scars, and I'm a counselor, a speaker, and an author, and I live in the UK. I was supposed to be here yesterday just to complete the series on John 4 with the woman at the well and how she experienced post-traumatic growth, or how she demonstrated change in her life after being with Jesus. And I'm speaking about this from a counselor perspective, not from a theological perspective. I'm not a theologian. I've never studied theology, but I read that in line with what I know about trauma, the impact of trauma. So the first day I talked about the men, and that was on Tuesday. You can go in on this channel, or whether if you're watching on Facebook, where I talked about the men and what are some of the things that happens in our lives where we sometimes there's a pattern that we have. And then I talked on day 2 on Wednesday about the mother-daughter, father-daughter relationship, and how that may have impacted her and the decisions and choices that she made. And so today I'm talking about, was there any growth that happened for her as that time that she had with him? What were the things that changed, and what were the evidences that we saw of change, and what evidence can you look for in your life about change? Now, I was doing the series Come See a Man between December and the end of January. We finished last week in Bristol, where I spoke on Come See a Man, and of course it was around mental health because I'm a counselor and that's what I do. But there's a conversation that happened in the Inner Child Healing coaching group that I run, that a question was asked, and she said, how do I know when I'm growing? How do I know when I'm growing, John? How do I know when I've accepted, when things are working and I'm integrating these things that I'm learning into my life? And how can I catalog growth? How can I know what are the signs that will tell me that I'm growing, that I'm healing, that things are changing? And sometimes measuring growth can be challenging when we're doing it around emotions and around healing, something that is it's not tangible in the sense that you're seeing physically something growing. And so sometimes maybe noticing growth in your own life might challenge you. People might take a while also to notice that you've grown, because sometimes we're working on things like our responses, and we're working on our trauma responses, and sometimes the people that are around us, because they're so used to us responding and reacting a certain way, they can't see that we've changed. And so we have to know for ourselves what to measure it by and what it might look like when we measure it, so that we're not judging ourselves as harshly as everybody else is judging us, but that we're able to notice change, and we're able to know that, yeah, I'm growing, and we can celebrate ourselves, you know. So if nobody gives us that dopamine hit, we can do it for ourselves, because we're able to see it for ourselves. So what are the things that can let us know that we're experiencing post-traumatic growth? So there are many different things that will show us growth, that you can use to measure your growth, to measure whether things are moving for you. But let's look at this woman, and what did she do? After her conversation with Jesus, she dropped her water pot, she ran, and she told, come see a man, right? She went to the men and she told them, come see a man. And for me, one of the things that shows us that we're growing is the way that we're able to talk about ourselves without shame. The way we're able to share our stories without being ashamed of ourselves. Because sometimes a story like she would have had can cause a lot of shame. 5 divorces, that is a woman with 5 divorces. One of the things I hear often from Christian women is that there's no place for me in the church because I'm divorced. There's nothing that caters to me. And they're often looking for something that speaks to the issues that they have and the pain that they've experienced. And oftentimes in many places, there's nothing that speaks to the divorced woman. And so here's this woman. We know that there's a lot of shame that attended around her life, because she was going to the well in the middle of the day on her own. So it's safe to assume that shame would have been an issue. But after her encounter, Shame went because she ran joyfully to go tell people to come see a man. And for me, it's significant because this is not the kind of telling that means I'm hiding. I'm hiding from, I'm pretending I'm going to hide in religion, and I'm going to be a busy worker, and I'm going to try and win souls for Christ. I'm going to be busy working while I'm not dealing with the issues that I have. But she dealt with it because that was what they talked about at the well. She and Jesus talked about it. He called out the things. He told her about herself, touched her heart. They had this conversation. So she wasn't hiding from her pain. She wasn't hiding from her story. They talked about her story in a way that made her feel joy, and she felt that living water that he talked about springing up into everlasting life. So there was no ignoring of the pain and the issues for her. She faced it. She knew it. It was fine. And so that's one of the things that we'll know that growth is taking place when we are not ashamed of our story, when we can let it go, when we can release it, and we can talk about it. Many times people struggle with, and Brene Brown says something really important that it's really good to interject here. She said, not everybody has earned the right to hear a story. Maybe it was significant for this woman to go tell it in the town where the harm took place, so she can let people know that I'm free because he freed me. Sometimes you might not be able to tell your story in your town. You might be able to have opportunities to tell it in many other towns, but in your town, which might be your home, which might be your home church, which might be the town that you grew up in, might not be the place where your ministry or your storytelling might start. You might be able to tell it in other places, but the fact that you can talk about your story without shame is a good measurement of growth. It tells you that you've grown when no part of your story causes shame for you anymore. So that's one. Another measurement, another thing to look out for when you're wondering about growth, and we see in the story, is we can challenge lies that are the experiences have told us about ourselves. We can challenge those lies. It's really important to be able to challenge misbeliefs, because oftentimes when we're working with traumatic experiences, the trauma itself caused harm, but what caused the long-lasting harm is the story that we have around the event, the story that we have around the story. And that's where sometimes that's what we have to fix in the narrative, the story that we tell ourselves about the pain, we tell ourselves about ourselves. This woman may have told herself a lot of things about herself, but she ran with joy and say, come see a man. He told me everything about me. She was no longer afraid or ashamed of her story. So we can see that maybe, in that short interaction, she learned to release it. All the misbeliefs were gone. It no longer mattered. None of the lies that she was telling herself anymore. She was able to say, come see. He told me everything about me. That means I own everything about me. I am okay with everything about me. Come see the person who tell me everything about me. You know about me, but what you know about me no longer affects me because I faced it. I faced everything about me. Come see him. And she went and she did that. So we're able, another thing that I wanted to touch on. So that's the challenging misbelief, releasing shame. We're able to integrate the story into our life and our lived experience. I mean, we can talk about it. We understand it. We see where it shows up. We don't have to spiritualize it. We do not have to spiritualize it by putting anything else about it. We don't have to wrap it in anything that we feel is make it prettier. Because when we want to wrap up our story and spiritualize it and use a lot of language that we feel, we're still hiding to some extent. And what we see from this woman is that after her encounter, there was no need anymore to hide. She knew, she accepted, she was okay, she released, she went forward free. And that's what happens when we have the space to process and to heal. We can move forward free. That's what we do at Wounds to Scars. We provide the space for people to be able to process and to move on free. And we do that through several different ways. We do that through our conferences, our online groups, and our materials that we write. So Our next conference is April 8 and 9 in Swansea, South Wales, and it's called Come See a Man. It's built around this theme in John chapter 4, but we're going to have men and mental health workshops for 16 to 18-year-olds, and we're doing workshops and have resources that's going to help you to move forward so you can have the same experience, where you can accept support, where you can challenge misbeliefs around the story, you can see the lies, you can release shame, and you can walk away free and joyful and rejoicing. I hope you'll make the time to come on that weekend to be with us so that we can help you grow the way she grew. Now, if you're not inside the UK, there's special live streaming available for people who are not in the UK. If you send me, I'm going to put my details below this video. If you send me a message, then I can send you the registration link for those who are not in the UK and want to join via video. So next week, I'm looking at a different story where I'm going to dive into abandonment and rejection, because I believe that's that is beneath most of our traumatic stories. So thank you for joining me. Have an amazing day and have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye.